I'm going to say that it is a good evening. It is November the 3rd, 2020. It is a day in which a lot of good things are happening. One of those good things is Vice President Elliott is celebrating her birthday. Now, I know people don't want me to sing happy birthday, so I'll just, because I do the Stevie Wonder version and I start moving my head like this. And but you don't want me to do that because we are running short of time. But I see Kaya is giving her a little birthday applause thingy, little emoji. So happy birthday, Vice President Elliott.
Thank
It is a
you.
blessing to get another day from God and to be able to share it with you as a board member. We all appreciate that. So
Thank
happy
you.
birthday and enjoy it as best you can in this craziness called COVID.
Definitely. Thank you.
So the next item on our agenda is the speakers list. We don't have any speakers tonight, isn't that right?
No speakers tonight.
All right. Vice President Elliott, we'll take that as one of your first gifts this evening.
Thank you.
No speakers.
Thank you.
Not that we don't enjoy our speakers, we do. But to be honest and frank, I know I and perhaps some of my other colleagues are anxious to get home and maybe watch some of the events that are taking place throughout the nation tonight. So we'll keep the agenda moving along. Next item on the agenda, and there are no written submissions, but Ms. Wade, Madam Clerk, could you describe for us, anybody's interested, how they might speak or provide a written submission?
Certainly. So if folks in the public would like to address the board, we encourage you to visit our website where we have all the instructions for that, but also please know that you can call the board office or you may email us at boardofeducation@rcsdk12. Please email us before 12 of the day of the meeting and indicate that you would like to speak, or you may also send your comments to that same email by 12 noon of the day of the meeting, and they will be documented, sent out to all board members and posted to the website.
Now, that is one of the ways in which, thank you, Madam Clerk, that is one of the ways that we engage the community. But for those of you out there who don't know it, we have a number of committees and that help us understand and move on certain issues of concern to the district and to the city. And one of those committees is the way in which we engage other partners in the community, the Committee on Intergovernmental Relations. I know Commissioner Adams, who chairs that committee on a number of occasions, has described on this very program what that committee does, but he has two very important updates that he wanted to share with his colleagues and most importantly with the community. Commissioner Adams?
Commissioner Adams, you are muted.
Yes, thank you. I want to take this opportunity to address this Family Engagement Day. Robocall has gone out to parents, but there's a lot of community members who aren't parents and may not have received robocall and may not have heard it. But Family Engagement Day is coming up again November 14th. That's a week from this Saturday at 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's going to be an entirely virtual event. The landing page is dedicated to providing resources to the parents and leading up to and after the event. It will not be live streamed, but will be recorded and available for replay on district website and social media platforms on Monday, November 16th at 5:00 p.m. It's going to feature a keynote with the superintendent. It's going to have an opportunity to have discussions with board members and key district leaders. And I'd like to take this moment to say to the board members, I really hope that you prioritize this date because it's the annual once a year Family Engagement Day, and the families would like to just engage with us. So please try to prioritize that day. I recall last year that I wasn't even on the board yet, but I did have to fill in because somebody wasn't there. We're going to have breakout rooms with the following topics. It's going to be remote learning technology, It's breaking down how to use online learning platforms, remote schooling, specialized service, reopening health and safety for special ed students, social emotional services, and student engagement, sports, and extracurricular activities. There'll be a Spanish session for Latino families. There'll also be live online raffles. So register early for that. Once again, that's Saturday, November 14th at 11 a.m. You can register. You should have gotten emails, robocall, but you can register online at rcsdk12.org. In addition to that, I want to speak to the board members in reference to the legislative breakfast agenda coming up in February. Could you put up, could you share the screen and put up the two pages for me, Rahima?
They're up, Commissioner Adams.
Okay, so this is from this year. And what was on the agenda items were, we was looking at that 35 million, full funding, we was trying to get our funding from the state, which we always trying to do. Actually, that's probably the number one purpose of the legislative agenda, man, is getting resources. And we have, so what we want to do is basically we're going to go with a lot of the same stuff, but in addition to that, we have some other items that we wanted to be considered, and we want to make the board members to look at it, the district executive team to look at it, and that is like funding for increased bandwidth related to remote learning needs for all students. Funding for child care support with a focus on supporting increased ability of educational supports to providers. A moratorium on charter schools. Reword for school safety priority to include restorative practices. Historically accurate anti-racist curriculum. Retain a diverse workforce by addressing hiring and firing policies, specifically LIFO. We have to be honest here. That's a tough fight. That's a heavy lift here, but we're still putting it on the table. Restructuring the MOE with the city of Rochester. And the NISBA proposed resolution 18 to oppose mid-year cuts. And resolution 12 opposed responsibility for substantially equivalent education. These are things that we need to probably just consider and think about as we get closer to February, when we'll actually have that breakfast, that agenda. So as other board members, I just want you to take a look at items that we have up for consideration. Look what we had last year, and we have to come together. It's not just me doing this thing, it's as a group. We'll come up with some, if we're gonna add anything, these bottom items to that, we'll get together with the administration and see. Because we're working together with them as a team this year. There's no big me's or little you. And that's pretty much all. I'm not gonna, this is election night. I'm not gonna beat us in the head with this too long. So once again, for everyone, November 14th, 11 a.m. Be there. I'll see you there. And with that, Van, I'm moving on.
All right, thank you very much, Commissioner Adams. Before I can move on, I should have said, as Commissioner Adams referenced, and I did at the beginning, hey, listen, tonight is an important night, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Working Party member. Get your stuff done, and if you haven't voted, get out there and vote. You have until 9 o'clock tonight. Y'all heard the record numbers of people voting in advance. However, some people, present company included, have not voted yet. So that doesn't mean I'm out of the game yet. I have until 9 o'clock, and I have every intention, along with the rest of America, to make sure that I cast my vote tonight. And I'm going to do what I normally don't do, be short and sweet whenever I am asked to speak. So next item on the agenda. Thank you,
One quick
Commissioner.
second, President White.
Yes.
Vice President Elliott has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wouldn't even look at the chart yet. Yes, Vice President Elliott.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to Commissioner Adams that one point that we talk about diversity, if you could pull that back up in the last in, first out. I just wanted to share that there are some organizations, Xerox at one point being one of those organizations, as well as I believe the University of Michigan, that has specific kinds of hiring, and for lack of a better term, I'll use it, quotas. So for example, depending on at Xerox, I remember when I was there, depending on the number of employees within the different demographics was the percentage by which layoffs were made. So it was not a last in, first out model, but it was dependent on the number of the various demographics that was employed by Xerox. So for example, if you had 10% of the workforce that was Latinx, and you had 20% that was African American, so that would be the number, that would be the rate by which people were downsized. So it was not based on last in and first out. So that may be a model, and I think it is the University of Michigan, another model that can be used in terms of trying to advocate for hiring and firing policies on the state level. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. Go ahead.
So thank you, and I just have to be honest about that. That's a battle. That's a battle that we're gonna have to fight. We would have to fight with the union here and with Albany. And I'm definitely prepared to support something like that. But I just need everybody to be honest and know that that's what they call the heavyweight battle there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Thank you, Vice President Elliott. Before we go on to governance discussion, I wanted to, under new business, which there really isn't much, it's actually somewhat of old business. Commissioner Malloy, could you, you had indicated you wanted to offer some thanks. Could you do that now?
Oh, of course. Thank you. My pleasure. On behalf of the Board of Education, good evening, everyone. I should say that first. On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to extend our profound gratitude to the 10 Million Project Foundation, who together with T-Mobile for Education have generously provided the district with 2,900 Wi-Fi hotspot devices, along with 100 gigabytes of T-Mobile high-speed wireless service per year for 5 years to help bridge the access divide that has existed for so many of our families who lacked reliable internet. Reliable internet access is crucial for our students now more than ever before during this pandemic, and will allow students to complete homework, conduct research for school projects, as well as assist students in exploring higher education opportunities. These devices and the provided internet access are valued at nearly $1.5 million. And so we humbly thank the 10 Million Foundation, as well as T-Mobile for Education, for their generosity, and we recognize their continued commitment to bridging the equity gap between communities. Additionally, we would like to extend our thanks to the Rochester Area Community Foundation for their gift of over $4,500 to be used for district communications. These gifts will have a profoundly positive impact on our students' lives, and we are grateful for these partnerships. On behalf of our district, thank you very much.
You know, as Commissioner Malloy was just giving those thanks to those important community partners, it occurred to me that over the years, different board members have taken on the role of reading the thank you resolutions, as I call them. Commissioner Malloy volunteered on her own to do that. But, it occurred to me, it's just as she was reading it, and you did a really good job thoroughly explaining what the donation was and why we appreciate it. Occurred to me that, we always, you old timers like myself who've been around for a while, these resolutions usually appear at the end of the agenda. People are usually tired, they're ready to go home, they ain't trying to hear about whatever we're talking about at 9:30 at night. I'm going to exercise the privilege of the president, and we're going to move this agenda around. We're going to begin thanking these people at the beginning of the agenda because, one, people do need to hear thanks, but two, typically when we get these, we have to read these resolutions. When we decide to read these resolutions, it's good news. And often, nobody did it intentionally. The news was buried at the end of the agenda, right before we go into executive session, right before people are ready to go home. So we're gonna move this agenda around a bit at the next meeting and read these, and we can switch up. I mean, any commissioner can read them, particularly if you have an interest in it. But it is appropriate and right that these folks, the good news of what these folks do, gets shared at the beginning of the agenda, not at the end of the agenda. So thank you, Commissioner Malloy, for that. And I look forward to other board members taking an interest in doing the same thing as well. All right, next item on the agenda, actually, it's governance. And Commissioner Malloy, I'm going to turn the gavel over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you. Good evening to Dr. Myers-Small, to Dr. Jallow, our executive cabinet members, and as well as my fellow board members, and to all of those, or for those of you from the community who are listening in this evening. Welcome to our board governance committee meeting. For our community members listening in tonight, I'd like to very quickly repeat the purpose of the governance committee. Board governance deals directly with board oversight. Our purpose here is to work with fellow board members to determine our collective development needs, to coordinate training to enhance our ability to perform our roles as commissioners. And we are also responsible for maintaining an effective working relationship with our superintendent. Our committee facilitates the orientation of our new board members. And of course, we will have very soon, we'll be welcoming a new board member following the board process. And governance is also tasked with annually updating the superintendent and their evaluation tool, supervising and evaluating board staff, and working with board members to modify as necessary the board's staff and self-evaluation tool. So as a board, we continue to develop plans articulating how board committees will work with the full board and the superintendent in coordinated effort to achieve our annual goals. The governance committee organizes for ongoing professional development. And last but certainly not least, board governance helps to oversee the implementation of the DE action items as part of the Distinguished Educators Report. So this evening, welcome. And our first item of business is a presentation of our superintendent's goals. If you recall from last month's meeting, the board provided Dr. Myers-Small as well as her cabinet with our board goals and metrics. And we finally approved this at the October 22nd business meeting. Our board goals were needed in order to provide Dr. Myers-Small and her team with a general outline upon which to assist in the rollout of the superintendent's goals and strategic plan. So as governance chair, I am thrilled we were finally able to accomplish this task together as a board. I am looking forward to Dr. Myers-Small presentation this evening. And I'd like to preface Dr. Small's presentation by expressing a heartfelt thanks for her, or to her and to her team with their patience with the board as we work to finalize our own goals and district objectives. So without further ado, I hand the gavel over to Dr. Myers-Small. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Good evening, President White, Vice President Elliott, to the other commissioners, to our executive cabinet members, the board staff, and those who are watching. I'm excited tonight or this evening to present my superintendent goals to the Board of Education and to my team and the general public. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So the 2020-21 annual goals are a regular part of the process for the evaluation of the superintendent, and that this applies to a superintendent in any school district. The goals are set, and then the superintendent goes about fulfilling those goals through a variety of means. And I'll go through some of those examples. The Board of Education also evaluates me through the tool that they've chosen, and I'm familiar with this tool. I've used it previously. It's called Super Eval, and it's a pretty intuitive document where I'm measured on my relationship with the board, my ability to manage the finances, my oversight of academics, etc. And then there's several subcategories, and under those categories, I have the opportunity to upload links, documents, or other evidence to show that I have fulfilled that evidence. On each of those subcategories, the Board of Education will individually rate me as hopefully either highly effective, but there's also developing and ineffective. And so there'll be a rating for each, then an overall rating for the complete category, and then an overall rating for the entire document. So just for those who don't understand how the superintendent in Rochester is rated, that's our process. So what kicks it off, however, is the presentation of the goals to the Board of Education. And as you can see, there are 6 big goals that I am focusing on that I will go in a little bit of depth. So the first one is student achievement. I have 6 not goals, but I have 6 activities that will show that the board will measure me on of my ability to accelerate the academic performance of each student in the Rochester City School District. So looking at things like having our schools being in good standing, and you'll note that it shows up in the strategic plan, for example, or making sure that our comprehensive schools and our targeted schools meet their demonstrable improvement indicators. So this area obviously focuses solely on academics and ensuring that we are moving that needle, as I've said many times, that academic needle in the positive direction. Goal 2 is accountability, and that's establishing a systematic program of work for my team that evaluates and improves academics, operational, and fiscal performance of the entire school district. So very first activity is that have to balance the district budget, working in conjunction also with Dr. Jallo to develop that 5-year financial plan. I was involved with that. And there are other goals, but that's just an example, some of the examples of what accountability looks like. The third goal is parent and community engagement. And I know that area certainly is very important to not only Commissioner Adams, but others. And so really to make sure not only that we're building and strengthening those partnerships with our families, but the community as well. So examples of activities are having meetings with parents and caregivers, and we have many groups within the district, and really help work with them to identify issues, problem solve, and receive feedback to help us make some decisions with the district. So for example, when we conducted our focus groups last month, I co-facilitated the meeting with our parents and then with our CPAC parent group. So that would be an example. Also really making sure that we're strengthening those strategic partnerships with higher education. So University of Rochester, Monroe Community College, St. John Fisher, et cetera. Making sure that we create and develop relationships with corporate healthcare, faith-based institutions. And we've mentioned before that we have the Faith in Action Adopt a School program. So we have over 45 churches and faith-based institutions who have adopted schools that are in their near where the church or the religious organization is located. Then the next goal is healthy youth development. So making sure that we are conducting forums with students that are not only sponsored by me, but the staff and our commissioners, Making sure, also this one is important. There are two things under here that I think it's really important to share is we have a equity and excellence policy, but to really make sure that diversity, inclusion, and anti-racist regulation is fortified. So that's how we actually employ the policy. And also one of the things that's important too is that we really need to make sure that we have a district-wide gender identity regulation to make sure that we're supporting our students in that realm. The fifth goal is safety and discipline. So that's obviously making sure that we have a positive, safe, and respectful, not only physical environment for our students, but emotional and psychological as well. And then goal 6 is diversity, equity, and anti-racism. And that looks at increasing the administrative staffing at central office, at the school levels, looking at creating a staffing strategy that helps to address the diversity that right now does not reflect the racial and ethnic demographic of our students. As you know, we also work with the city of Rochester to implement the My Brother's Keepers grant that was initiated under former President Obama, and that's to really support Black and brown men to pursue higher levels of education, to give them training and professional development, and then also to have a focus on trauma-informed care trainings. And we know that that's so important, whether we're in a remote environment or not. Next slide. So what are the contents of these goals? One, they are measurable. So there is a target that I am aiming for that my goal is to accomplish by June 30th, 2021. And then when that time comes, I will provide to the board the number that I've actually achieved. The goals and the performance objectives are also crosswalked. Every single one is crosswalked to board goals and metrics. So there's the alignment to what Commissioner Malloy mentioned, which was completed in October. They also parallel the academic and fiscal plans. So there's a parallel relationship between what I've outlined and what Dr. Jallo has outlined in her plans. And it obviously is very clearly aligned to the strategic plan, which was just approved, thank you very much, by the Board of Education recently as well. So that's just an overview of my goals, and certainly Commissioner Malloy, open up for feedback or open up for questions, but that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Dr. Myers-Small. Thank you, much appreciated. Those are thorough. What I'd like to do right now is I'd like to open the floor for discussion on the superintendent's goals. Do we have any questions regarding these at this time? Let me just open up my page here. Are there any questions for Dr. Myers-Small regarding the goals? I am not seeing any hands. Well, on behalf of the board, thank you so much for this presentation. We've been looking forward to that. If there are no further questions, I'd like to call for a motion to accept the superintendent's goals with the understanding that these are the goals by which we will be evaluating her for the mid-year superintendent's informal evaluation set to take place on February 2nd during executive session. We will also use these goals for the formal end of year evaluation on June 29th, slated to be conducted at an end of year retreat with the superintendent. Can I get a motion to approve these goals? Thank you, Vice President Elliott. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of approving our superintendent's goals, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? All right then. So our second order of business pertains to our board polling results. The New York State School Boards Association, as well as the Monroe County School Board Association bodies, recommend regular polling of members to analyze whether or not we are meeting specific board goals, among other things. We have been participating in some informal polls at the end of our regularly scheduled business and committee meetings for several months now via a Zoom polling app. And analysis of the results of this polling, they indicate that Zoom didn't always pull the polls accurately, and the polls weren't necessarily being completed by all of our members regularly. And in some instances, these polls were not taking place. So what I would like to suggest to fellow board members is that we consider the key performance indicators that we wish to measure moving forward, just to ensure that our polls are accurate as well as useful. The data from our polls is really all over the place. We average about 5 commissioners taking this poll out of 7 commissioners. And it's ultimately not data we can effectively or efficiently use. So what we need to consider and perhaps decide as a board is, who is taking these polls? What is the purpose of the polling? Are the questions that we've been asking, are they sufficient? And finally, is this polling actually useful? So I realize that we might not be able to have a full-fledged discussion this evening necessarily, but I would like to open the floor to thoughts by my fellow members just regarding some general feedback or observations about the polling that we have conducted thus far, with the hopes of a better poll tool for data gathering. So let me just,
Commissioner Malloy, do you want
the screen?
Do you want me to go through the remainder of the pie charts?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that would be wonderful if you could. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. So on your screen, the first poll result that we had pertains to timeliness. And the question polled, if you recall from taking these copious polls, is did we adhere to the start or end time as stated on the agenda? 77% of the time persons said yes, and 23% of the time persons said no. Then the next next 2 questions have to do with the materials. And the questions asked, did you receive the materials in sufficient time for you to prepare for the meeting? And were the materials sufficient to assist you in forming an opinion on a decision made by the board? Majority of the time persons said yes, but there are, you can see 20% who said that needed more time to review the materials, and 10% needed more weightiness to the materials in order to form an opinion. The next poll result has to do with participation, and 100% of participants are generally satisfied with their opportunity to participate in debate during the board meetings. And as it has to do with the manner in which other board members contribute to the debate, 78% of persons say they are satisfied and 22% say no. The next one is as it relates to standards of conduct. And as you know, the board has put in place a standards of conduct document in their code of ethics. And so the questions ask, were there any violations of our code of conduct? 83% of persons say yes, there were violations during business meetings, and 17% of the time persons said no. And then the next question asks if there are violations to the bylaws. 74% say that there were violations, and 26% say no. Or rather, I flipped to those. 74% said no, and 26% said yes. Okay, and then the last question, the last 2 questions asks as it relates to meeting chair effectiveness. 91% of the time, persons agree that the chair is effective in allowing all sides to be heard while bringing the matter to a decision, and 9% say no. And then the last has to do with board impact, and the questions in that section ask, did we do anything to make a clear difference in the lives of our students? And 75% of the time persons say yes and 25% no. And then did we do anything that had a positive impact on any one of the district's key performance indicators? 78% yes and 22% no. So these are the questions that Commissioner Malloy raised at the beginning for discussion for tonight on the poll results.
Thank you so much, Kalia. I do see some hands. Commissioner Powell go ahead.
Hey, thank you. Sorry, I'm moving. I just let the dog out. So my first reaction is that compiling the results across all 11 meetings that were evaluated isn't necessarily the most useful way, because let's throw out an example. We might start and end on time 9 times out of 10. And all of the no's were for that 10th time, that 10th meeting that went beyond its stated end time or some other such example. And there's no real way to remedy it if you're working on an aggregate number. On the other hand, let's say you have someone, let's say at one meeting, a chair doesn't give, the consensus of that meeting is that one chair didn't give board members an adequate opportunity to participate, didn't manage the stack well. You can address that with a conversation or a little bit of training on, good chairmanship or something like that. But if you're not prepared to do some kind of intervention, then it's not useful. Let's use the example of, did everyone get the materials on time? Well, if the standard is that we get the materials 3 days prior to a meeting, and that benchmark was met, but somebody still says, no, I didn't have an adequate amount of time to review the materials, that's not something as a group that we are necessarily going to address if the administration met their responsibility of delivering the information in a timely manner, right? That's an individual problem, not an institutional problem. You did ask the question, is there a better survey mechanism? This past weekend, the New York State School Board Association had their annual meeting, and they did the delegate votes using a poll, right? But it was a straight up and down vote. So we didn't need any more information than a yes or a no. In a situation like this, the questions, like in order to actually remedy the areas where we're failing, you need more information. You need to know who was chairing a meeting that didn't give anyone adequate participation, or who in particular was violating the code of conduct. The polling mechanism, if it doesn't allow folks to add commentary or, then it doesn't quite live up to expectations. And the last thing I'll say is, we knew we weren't going to get 100% participation because one board member told us that she wasn't going to participate. But if the input we're getting from the other members is consistent, then that doesn't mean that the results are invalid. We really should, if everybody thinks, yes, we always start and end on time, at some point, we don't even need to measure that anymore. We should put a different question in that will give us something else we can improve on. But in a case where, in some of those other cases, we need to be able to drill down and figure out, well, how do we fix this? If half or more of the board is unhappy with this, you know, whichever one, receiving materials on time, maybe, then we need to be gathering enough information to be able to offer up a solution to it.
Commissioner Malloy, is it possible if I can respond a little bit to some of the questions regarding? Okay.
Oh yeah, please. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Definitely, these are some of the things that we're talking about, and I want to be able to provide the data meeting by meeting as well. Since we are meeting as a group and in the interest of time, we just did the averages of the meetings for today, but I do also have them by each individual meeting. So can provide that data as well so that we can drill down. I definitely hear your point regarding looking at aggregate data and how is that going to help us if we are particularly looking at one meeting over another. That information is readily available and I can provide that out. But in the interest of time and also just as a first showing of the data, thought it might be best to look at it in the aggregate to get a sense of what the responses were looking like.
Thank you so much, Kalia. And a thank you to our board staff, especially to Kalia, for compiling all of this data for us.
Well, and I have to say thank you to our newest board staff, Rahima, who did the
Rahima.
for us. We worked together on it. So thank you. She's new, but she's already gotten started and running. So
kudos. Thank you so much, Rahima, as well. I didn't mean to leave you out there. Thank you. I want to say thank you to Commissioner Powell for bringing up those valid points and contributing to the discussion. I do see two other hands. The first hand that I see is that of President White. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Thank you for putting this on the agenda. It was, I know it was a lot to get it on there. And in that regard, thank you, Rahima and Kaya, for the good work that is done. It's put in a very succinct, clear way. I only would piggyback on something Commissioner Powell said, and I think everybody would agree. This doesn't have to be a static poll. I mean, it can change. For example, if people thought and I'm not sure this is where everybody's at, but I think Commissioner Powell makes a good point. If people thought that the starting on time, ending on time wasn't particularly helpful, we could always add questions. You know, if people wanted to maybe dig deeper into a particular key performance area rather than just say, have we complied with our key performance areas generically? Maybe we want to focus in on one thing. And if we find out that we're not addressing that particular issue enough at each meeting, if that's our will, then maybe the poll would tell us that. So I look at this as a sort of a living, breathing document. I think this is a good first review. And then again, to put it in its historic context, it was really, I think, intended to do a self-evaluation of the boards, not even necessarily broadly in terms of how we impact the district, but how we relate to ourselves and how do we interact and how effective are we in the course of a meeting, from time management to how we treat each other. And so I think it was a very good first attempt into this arena to sort of evaluate ourselves, but it can get broader. It can go into what other people are doing. But I think what we see in these initial questions is almost a self-reflective assessment. And in that respect, I'll sum by saying, I think it actually was very helpful, because I think it got people, everybody, myself included, to look at our own behavior, because we knew at the end of the meeting, we were going to have to own up to that behavior. And for example, just so nobody thinks I'm talking about somebody else, I'm a notoriously late person. We used to, in the old days when I worked at City Hall, we used to call it Bill Johnson time. Bill Johnson would come late. I'll say this publicly because everybody knows it. He would come 40, 50, an hour late for a meeting, and we would just call it Bill Johnson time. And I can't blame him for it, but I have been a notoriously late person. So when that question is put on there, I may not have always been better, but I've tried to get better at being on time. I have not always been successful. So I think, again, for a little context, I think part of the idea was, how do we look at this sort of, use it as a mirror and look at how we can improve. And I think it was very helpful, but I would support anybody who suggests that maybe we should contemplate changes, maybe add a question or two. So thank you, Commissioner Moore.
And I just want to jump on and say, so the Zoom poll feature does not allow us to ask more than 10 questions, but I really do like the idea of switching out the questions as we see, you know, we want to delve into something else. The meeting time seems to be one already that I'm hearing that we might want to switch out for something more weightier or weighted, so.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kalia, and thank you so much, President White, for those comments. And yeah, I just got to say, President White, whew, there is President White time too. Like, you made it to that MLK assembly at Brighton High School by the skin of your teeth.
I did.
I was on the spot there, but you made it. You got there. And it was a great presentation. So thank you for that. That was a couple years back. I see another hand, Commissioner Adams.
Yeah.
Oh, you just got muted. Sorry about that.
I think we should rethink some of the questions. Be able to put an address on some stuff. It's like if the question is, are there any board members that wear a hat at the meeting? You should be able to say yes, Commissioner Adams. We shouldn't be so broad that people can maybe wonder who they talk. You know, I just think the questions need to be able to have an address on them. That's for it to be meaningful and not just going through the motions of checking the box. I participated in every one unless it was I didn't have enough time to do it. I'm just not as mobile with my fingers as some commissioners are. Before I even look at it, some commissioners are done. I think 10 questions is a lot after a long meeting. I think we probably should reduce that to the number of commissioners. We should reduce that to 7 questions. And that's all I have. I really believe we should rethink some of the questions. They need to be a little more telling and not so broad, because if one of the questions was anything violated that was any codes violated, I can't see having to put a blank yes or no answer on there and probably like sabotage the whole meeting because of maybe one incident and give it a bad rating, the meeting a bad rating, because it could have been a good meeting, even though there was an incident in there. It could have been a really effective, good meeting. And so I need to be able to put that in there. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Adams. You bring up some really great points there. I completely agree. I do see another hand. Commissioner Powell has her hand up.
I agree with what Commissioner Adams just said about a meeting could be a really good meeting except for one incident. But I think that really sort of undoes what he said earlier about, you know, if there's a code violation, we probably all know what it was and we all know who was involved, and the important thing is to hold the body accountable for allowing it to happen or allowing it to continue if it continues. Also, I don't think any of us should allow ourselves to feel rushed through the survey. I think part of that happens because a lot of times we've already got a motion to adjourn on the floor, and all anybody wants to do is log off and go get some supper. But we can own whether there's pressure to do that or to do it or to fill out the survey thoughtfully. that's a culture thing. We can set our own culture, especially this early in the whole process of self-evaluating.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Powell. I know just in preparation for the meeting, I know that when Callie and I had spoken, we had discussed whether or not having a poll take place at the end of a meeting was maybe the most beneficial tool. Perhaps we offer that tool at a different time instead of offering it at the end of a meeting, or maybe we just offer some sort of survey at the end of a month. Or so I think we have a lot of options available. And I think we've had a really healthy discussion this evening on this. And we've got great feedback here on where we can go from here. And so this is just stepping stones. So I certainly appreciate, Commissioner Powell, go ahead.
On that point, could we consider launching the poll before we break into executive session? It seems like we always have executive session, and that does provide kind of a natural pause. We've done almost all our business by that time, and we probably shouldn't be judging the meeting on what happens behind closed doors anyway. So I wonder if it would take some of the pressure off to launch the survey a little bit earlier before we start losing our quorum, after a motion to adjourn.
That's certainly a really great suggestion. Thank you, Commissioner Powell. President White, go ahead.
Yeah, in response to that, I remember that idea came up at first, and I don't remember who said it, but I think the consensus was to do it after executive session, because executive session is in fact part of the meeting. And, some of the questions, important questions that are asked about, was there a violation of the code standards of conduct, that can happen during executive session. So I get why we might want to, before executive session, conduct the poll, but and here's the other thing: there are other questions that are important. Key performance indicators. Did something impact the lives of children? You could have any number of things happen. An employee discharged because there are some allegations about inappropriate conduct. Anything could happen in executive session that could affect our ability to impact lives of children. So. And now let me just say, in terms of the pressure to go forward, I take responsibility for that. It is, in fact, in terms of how it's brought up. Thank you, Commissioner Powell, for repeatedly reminding me, because I'm the one who usually says, okay, it's time to go. And then people are just, okay, let's go. And if I had a better frame of mind to always remember, and I can get better at it, just a habit of making sure that I don't put it out there that the meeting's about to end. I think I can do a better job at that, and I will. And if I don't, I know Commissioner Powell and others will remind me. But I to Commissioner Powell's point, it's what our expectations are. We shouldn't feel rushed, and we do. Sometimes I think people, myself included, we do feel rushed to get it done. The reason why, though, that may not be have a detrimental effect on the results is the 10 questions. So you know what they are, and you can process them pretty quickly. So the rush that I feel sometimes, I don't think really affects my ability. This is just me, my ability to answer the questions, because I know what they are. And when we've had the meeting, I've been thinking about those things. Just like I told you, I'm a late person. I'm thinking in advance of the meeting. If I don't get to the meeting on time, I'm going to have to answer, no, the meeting did not start on time. Or if I talk too much, I'm going to, right? So I'm good.
Thank you, President White. I just had an idea, like, is there any reason why perhaps we couldn't have maybe 2 separate polls? I know I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but I mean, I know that the executive session is part of our meeting, but we're really dealing with different material during that time. Would it be helpful to perhaps have some sort of poll at the end, or survey at the end of the regular meeting prior to breaking into executive session? And then if there's a way that we can measure the data that comes out of executive session as well, I don't know if we need 2 separate polls necessarily, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Go ahead, Commissioner Powell.
Well, I think you've settled on the way to address the issue of being limited to only 10 questions. Launch 2 separate polls. Maybe the second poll could break out the 4 areas of impact into separate, if in fact we had an impact on students, these are the 4 areas, check the yes box for the ones you think we actually made an impact in, and no for the ones we didn't, because Commissioner Adams was right that when you lump them all together, it becomes terribly vague, and I've never been entirely sure what those key performance indicators have been, so I'm kind of like, I'm answering yes blindly, but if they were, itemized 1, 2, 3, 4, then I could give a more honest answer.
Commissioner Malloy and Commissioner Powell, we were just reminded that we can only launch 1 poll per Zoom meeting. So I know we are limited to what the Zoom platform can do. So we might have to look at another polling service based on these.
Let me find out how the NISBA handled it then, because they launched a 1-question survey 26 times, for each of the resolutions that the delegates were asked to vote on. Mm-hmm. So they figured it out somehow. I'll ask them what they did precisely to manage that.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Powell. Thank you, Kalia. So I think we're at a really great starting point here. And if there are no further comments, just, considering the time, it's election night, get out to vote if you haven't already. I've got my sticker. So just considering our time constraints that we have, and we do have one more agenda item, if there are no further comments, I guess we can continue this discussion at our next governance meeting, and we'll hopefully have developed a more effective polling device or tool for our members. But I appreciate the conversation that has taken place this evening, and I think we're at a really good jumping off or starting point. So thank you. All right, our final item on the governance agenda this evening is a presentation by our District Communications Chief, Marisol Lopez, on the communications protocol between the board and superintendent's office. So I'd like to say in advance, thank you, Marisol, for this presentation. And I guess with that, I hand over the gavel to Ms. Lopez.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Malloy. Good evening, commissioners. This is actually not a presentation, but a brief discussion. We provided you with a copy of the recommended protocols for communication. As you know, since Superintendent Myers-Small has come into the administration, there wasn't a point person assigned to deal with board-related issues. That person is me. And so what we are requesting is that any requests that come from the board go directly to your board clerk. She will connect with me and I will address it through the administration's end and bring it back to her so that she can bring it to you. And so it's important that we have a repository for information, that we're able to document what your questions are and what your requests are, and that we're able to track those and follow through. And so the protocol, the communications protocols that I sent you address those items. And I just wanted to make sure that we understand that your requests are priority. We do have a 24-hour turnaround time, and if that is not possible, we will communicate that to you so that you know how long an item is going to take. And certainly our greatest intent is to have the best customer service possible with you.
Thank you so much, Marisol. Given what has just been shared, I would like to suggest perhaps some sort of board retreat in the future to create a more formalized protocol between board staff and the board, as well as our superintendent. So hopefully that can be a topic for a future retreat. Are there any questions regarding what Marisol has presented or shared? Any questions? All right, wow, that was fast. So thank you to all who've shared this evening. So this concludes the governance portion of our agenda. And of course, there is still ample time to go vote in the general election. So my friends, get out there, get out the vote. The polls are still open. And that concludes tonight's governance meeting. The next governance meeting will be held on December 1st, 2020. And with that, I hand the gavel back over to our board president, President White. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. We have a couple of matters to discuss. We are now officially in our policy committee. That committee, you all know this, my colleagues know this, community may not know this. We have a great staff. They really do provide us the support and guidance we need to get through many of these important topics. And Rahima Wynn is one of our newest team members, but the way she's been doing her work, you would think she's been around for a while. Rahima, I would ask, accordingly, I would ask that you sort of guide us in, give the board an update with respect to the code of conduct and also a review of the new online credit course credit policy that is being proposed.
I'd be happy to. Good evening, commissioners. Good evening, community and administration. So first, in terms of the code of conduct update, as you recall at a previous meeting, it was decided that the code of conduct update would continue offline in a small committee forum. So there's a committee made up of Deputy Superintendent Martinez Davis, our General Counsel Carl. 2 of the school climate representatives will be there, as well as Kalia. This group will meet weekly to discuss and settle on the proposed recommendations, and then provide the board continual updates on that progress through policy committee. So they have now scheduled out 3 appointments, 3 of the weekly meetings to go through, and then additional meetings will be scheduled as necessary. And Kalia, I'm not sure if you have anything you want to add as a member of that committee.
No, just that the community, the School Climate Advisory Committee did also receive their invite to these meetings, and they have indicated their designee, their 2 designated persons. And so we will start that up very shortly. I believe the first meeting will be tomorrow. And just an update as well. General Counsel Christoph and Deputy Martinez and I have been meeting. We've had, is it 3 meetings thus far? We are steadily going through the code of conduct chart with the recommendations in preparation of having them go through the cabinet of the remainder of recommendations. As you recall, the cabinet has reviewed 1 through 25, and there are about 53 recommendations that were made from the School Climate Advisory Committee. And so we have been having some early morning meetings to do that as well. So we continue on, and the process hopefully will culminate in December with us being back here at the policy table to really establish what will take place for the code of conduct, and then following that, a public hearing. Carl is online, and so is Deputy Superintendent Martinez. So please jump in if you have anything else with regards to that procedure. All right, looks like we're all set, Rahima.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving right along then, in terms of the online course credit policy, we're actually going to have Deputy Superintendent Dr. Morris speak to that. I'll bring it up on the screen for you, Dr. Morris.
Thank you. So this policy that we are proposing for the board's consideration is relating to online learning and course credit that would be attributed to that learning. We wanted to have in the board policy included a policy that would allow for online learning, and this would be different than distance learning opportunities. So not any type of courses that our students would take that would be delivered via a distance learning, environment. This is important for a few reasons. First of all, it allows our district to have a policy that is commensurate with the other types of policies that other districts similarly have across the across the state. And also, we have adopted the language that has been proposed for a policy of this nature from NISBA. We also would like to have a policy on our in our policy cadre that allows us to, if we choose to long-term pursue a virtual school of some sort, we want to have a policy that's on board that allows us to formally encapsulate what courses look like and the course credits that would be attributed to those. So this is a policy that we would like to propose for review. It is in alignment with the commissioner's regulations, and it would come along with that direction to make sure that students have the opportunity to earn credits via courses that are administered online.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. Is there any questions or feedback?
So procedurally, Willa, you're much better at this than I am, or Carl. What's the process for this policy change? Carl, or you want to chime in on that?
Sure, I'd recommend at this point that the committee consider whether or not it should recommend this policy to the board for adoption. And then at that point, the policy indicates that the board will have one or more readings. Perhaps you may want to waive one or more of those readings, which of course could be done with the full board at a regular meeting, in as much as the policy committee consists of all of the board members.
So I will take that advice from you, Mr. Christoph, as I frequently do. And we will, I need a motion to move. Thank you, Vice President Elliott. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. All those in favor of moving this particular proposal from the administration regarding online course credit policy, a new online course credit policy, please indicate your position in favor of this by indicating aye. Again,
Aye.
that is to move this to the for the full board. I heard one aye and aye. Madam Clerk, you good? Commissioner Powell, did you want to say something?
Yeah, about the process now that it's been advanced to the full board. The easiest shortcut that Mr. Christoph suggested doesn't waive any part of the policy at all, but simply as an information item, as long as it's provided to the board in writing in its final form. I used to do it, and as part of our Friday packet with a cover memo, so that people can see and read the entire recommended policy with changes in situ. The information items step can be done between meetings, and that basically cuts an entire 30 days out of the process without waiving any part of the policy.
All right, so we may in fact do that at our next meeting. Dr. Morris, go ahead. Go ahead, Will.
So what I mean is, having moved it out of committee, you could circulate it in an email, as an email attachment, and that would qualify as the information item, so that our next board meeting, it would be on the agenda as a discussion item. And so with our board meeting coming up mid-month, that means that we could be acting on it in December.
Okay, I see that makes sense to me, and I see Carl nodding his head. So that's what we'll do. Kaya, I'm sure you can work with Dr. Morris to make sure that it gets emailed and distributed to everybody as Commissioner Powell had suggested, so we can advance this quicker. And the rationale for those of you watching this to advance it quicker is we're right in the midst of this whole thing where this kind of policy is really important given COVID. Most of our children would need the benefit of this kind of policy. So that's the reason for sort of accelerating it. All right. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Dr. Morris, for your work on this. Thank you, Rahima, for your work on it as well. And Commissioner Powell, thank you for providing us that procedural. Okay, next item on the agenda is policy manual update. I think you've somewhat covered that, Rahima, but do you want to give us any other additional update on that?
Yes, Commissioner White, that's in reference to the entire policy update. And so, we've been having some discussion. I know in our preview meeting, we talked about the potential of moving the entire policy manual update off to a subcommittee. And that subcommittee would be made up of commissioners, representatives from legal department, the policy parent rep, and any appropriate administrative subject matter experts. It was suggested that we potentially hold off the finalizing of the structure of that until the new board member comes on, so that they would have the opportunity to weigh in on that as well. Proposed that the committee would meet at least bi-weekly so that we can move through the updates. And then we created with the incorporated recommendations from NISBA, created a tracking sheet that could potentially be used to track the policy changes and to share out updates to the policy committee. The policies would be reviewed in appropriate blocks, so we could look at it in any number of ways, but that would be open for discussion. And what would happen is the policy would go through the subcommittee for their first review. It's proposed that they would then send it to executive cabinet and the superintendent for their review, where they would have up to 45 days to go ahead and review and make any suggested changes. It would come back to the subcommittee, who would then forward it on for everyone to review and have input. And then as appropriate, we would engage with the SLC, the Student Leadership Congress, for student input for appropriate policies.
I usually wait for comments from my colleagues first, but let me emphasize again, Rahima is talking like she's been here for 2 years. My goodness, she knows the system. I'm doing one of those applaud things. Well done, Rahima. I told her, I said, well, listen, you're going to need to describe for the board where we're at in our previous meeting, but she's done more than that. She's described it like a veteran. And to Kalia, Francine, and to Rahima, as I've said before, you all have us organized. It's quite impressive, and I'm very, some might say I shouldn't say this, but I'm very proud of you all. You're really doing a great job, and they're making the board look good. And maybe I shouldn't say that, but it is good to see that you all have a command of what it takes to bring an organization to where it needs to be. And I frequently talk about the finish line. You can see that finish line, but if you don't know how to get over those hurdles and you don't know how to get your stride right, and you guys have a stride that I think is extremely impressive and one of the best. We've had some good teams, but I got to say, I think you're one of the best teams that we've had. And I on behalf of the board, really want to thank you for that. Rahima, the way you have come in here and taken, has shown some mastery of a system that takes many people months and months and months to figure out, and then figure out how to organize it. It's just remarkable. And I want to thank you for having the insight to take this position and then the wisdom to move it forward in a very effective way. So thank you again. Well done. Well done.
Thank you very much. Kalia and Francine have done an amazing job in training me. So
yeah, they must have, because it is very impressive. All right. Any update on our standing item, the NSBA? I'm sorry, NISBA's policy update. Is there any update on that?
Yes, Mr. President. Just very briefly, NISBA has notified us that they have come up with 8 proposed new policies with respect to educational equity. In addition to a change regarding the records retention schedule, which is going to be a mandatory item for us. In light of the fact that we have a pretty strong policy on educational equity already in the board's policy 0201, and given that the superintendent is working now on a system-wide equity plan that's going to take the form of a regulation, which she mentioned in her presentation earlier. What I'm going to suggest is that we obtain the proposals that they have in the area of equity inclusivity, and diversity, including an exhibit and the equity, inclusivity, and diversity in education regulation, just for the superintendent's consideration as she continues working on the plan that she is preparing. There are also some useful reference documents in the policy list concerning student learning standards and instructional guidelines, textbook selection and adoption, library materials selection, recruiting and hiring, all seen through the lens of education equity. Again, to the extent that they may be helpful for the superintendent, I'm going to suggest that we obtain those policies and give them to the superintendent for her consideration and adoption or use in any way that she sees fit, because I know she's already pretty far along in her effort. There is one additional matter of a policy which they've numbered 9700, having to do with professional learning and staff development. And in that connection, although the policy itself they are saying is optional, there are provisions in it that are required. So that's another one that I think we should obtain and in due course put in the queue for consideration along with the other policies that we're currently working on. The policy on records retention, the reason why that is important, and we probably ought to give that fairly early consideration, is that the state recently did away with the records retention schedule that used to apply to schools. And it instead is having schools and all other local governments use a new schedule, which they call LGS Schedule 1. To the extent that we are obliged to comply with that schedule, it seems to me we had better get a policy change on the books fairly quickly. So with that, that's the report with respect to what's new on the NYSSBA policy front.
Thank you, Mr. Kristoff. All right, that concludes the contents, the subjects that we had to cover under our policy committee. In a moment, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. But before I do that, I'm going to say it's time to do our survey. See, I learned it's slow. The process is slow, but I get there. So, Ms. Wade, if you want to put up that survey, or Tom, if you could put up that survey, I'd appreciate it.
Should be on the screen now.
Thank you. Nope.
Are you seeing it now?
Nope.
Huh.
There we go.
If you push the down button on your Zoom button, it'll, okay.
As you all finish up your surveys, I did that in part because we, until we change the agenda, we have no executive session items tonight. Is that correct? Mr. Kristoff, I look at your face on the screen because I know you're the one that sometimes. I got a thumbs up. Kaya, no executive session. And Leslie, no. Can I get a thumbs up from you? I don't see Leslie.
White, is this a record? I mean,
I don't know. Vice President Ellie is kind of quiet.
Condensed into one.
Yeah.
This
well,
I'm gonna make sure that there's an election every Tuesday night.
No. We just want this one. We just want this
Every
one.
Tuesday night is gonna be an election.
Any other
Steve.
persons finishing up the poll? Reminder that, or superintendents, or board members and or state monitor can take this poll. That's who we have taking it currently. So.
And Commissioner Malloy, on this point of the poll being modified, I assume your committee will meet, or you'll meet with Kaya and others and maybe try to work some suggestions out to give to us at another meeting or at your next committee meeting?
Yes, we will be doing
Okay.
that.
Okay. All right. Well then, can I get a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Adams, thank you very much. All those in favor of seeing our future, indicate by saying aye and saying good night. Good night, everybody. Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.